I'm very happy to be on with you tonight. I hope you're well. I hope you got my urgent prayer request in your email from Ella Connor. Won't mention it here, but if you haven't, take a look at it. Prayer is needed right now. Going to look at the Hazon Gabriel tonight. So a most remarkable text and unique as well. And if we have time, which we probably will, we shall look a little at the Gospel of the Lots of Mary, another really interesting Coptic text as well. I'm going to put the translation up for you on the screen, but I can also tell you that there's an ebook on the Hazon Gabriel. It's at the think tank site on files. You go to the Vero Yahad think tank, you go on files, and you can find it there along with some other ones. Maybe I'll just show you, if I can, quickly. Files. Okay, let me change over to share screen. This is the file section right here. See, I clicked over here on the left side, files. I've got the Sefer Zerubbabel, the Lots of Mary, Gabriel Revelation, or the Hazon Gabriel, the full ebook, and just the translation here also. So you can download those, or just you can follow along if you want. I will now go to another site and bring that up. I'm afraid this is not able to be seen real well. This translation is still under copyright, and I'm fixing to OCR so we can edit it some. All right, I found that open mic. I'm going to go through the book a little bit so I don't miss anything. A couple of years ago, this was really a point of not only interest but contention among scholars. This had just been found. It was donated by a collector to a museum, and then that brought it out into the open so it could be looked at. It appears to come from the turn of the era, that is between 100 BC and 100 AD, and when you get into the contents a little bit, you'll see why it is provenanced in that age and time, because it has a lot to do with the Messiah. And the translator talks about the Messiah, son of Yosef, who we don't really hear much about unless we're looking into the Talmud. What's so unusual about this as a Dead Sea Scroll is it's got all the characteristics of a scroll. It's written in columns. It is not written in a scroll. It's written on a piece of stone. One side of that stone has been smoothed down, and not for chiseling either, for actual writing with pen and ink, the same kind of ink that's used on the Dead Sea Scrolls. The paleography, that is the handwriting, is also of the scrolls variety. Paleographers, again, have deemed it to be from somewhere around 1 BC. And the content of it, if you don't know, is remarkable. Because there's a line reading, for instance, the Messiah, son of Yosef. There's a lacunae there. And then it says, in 3 days, you shall live. Previous translations of this, which you'll find online, do not add will live. But Israel Knoll, this translator, was able to, through heroic efforts, to identify the letters in this. Actually, in the ebook, you'll find the Hebrew there for you who are studying Hebrew. And it's not very easily read, although I'm sure that there are closer up versions of it that you could probably go in and read and see what you could decipher for yourself. And it's almost universal that they believe that this predates the life of Yahshua. It is an apocalypse. There is mention of blood and battle in it, but it's full of messianic apocalyptic readings, most of which are just fragmentary. But what we can make out is, well, when I first got into this, it was startling. First of all, that it was set up exactly like a scroll in columns. There was a inscribed line between the two columns. And then why it would be written in ink is beyond me. You know, the tradition there is that in stone you chisel it out. This stone was supposedly a part of a building, probably somewhere down near where you could stand close to it and read it. They don't know what that is. It's what building it might have been, though, because they don't know the exact provenance of it. They don't know where it came from. Of course, as a stone, it's well preserved, but the text, the ink itself, is not so well preserved. It's full of, the letters are very hard to read, and there are numerous lacunae, numerous holes in. It's written in basically the first person, Gabriel, and in one particular line, it looks like he's referring to himself not as a person, but as a malach, as an angel. He talks from a first-person perspective, and he includes in his quote the name Michael as well. Then he speaks of Messiah in third person, insofar as we can make that out. He actually identifies himself with Gabriel. If it is a man, then we have another text, one of the few where we don't have a pseudonym as the author, but a real person. If it's an angel, I don't know about that. Would the angel write on stone with ink? Throughout this, in many places, the word Yahweh, the sacred name, is used, and Elohim as well. In this translation, Noel translates Elohim as Lord. I went down into the Hebrew, and I was able to see that with a magnifying glass. I don't quite understand why, but that's the reference there. When you see Lord, behind it, it's Elohim. Another word that we know quite well is used throughout the text, and that is kavod, glory or esteem. There's quotes from Yahweh Elohim in here, speaking of his servant David. Leads us to believe that of the factions that this might have came out of, this particular faction was for the Davidic kingdom and the Davidic kingdom of the future, we probably wouldn't find that in a Pharisee text. First of all, the Pharisees didn't generally write apocalypses. Take, for instance, 3rd Enoch. We know who wrote that. It was a Pharisee rabbi. When it became known that he wrote this apocalypse, 3rd Enoch, they kicked him out of the denomination. They're not into apocalypses, especially those that would glorify temple or glorify the Scion of David. We find a quote in here from Exodus 26 that's well known. He shows mercy to thousands. That might also be in Isaiah 56, if I remember correctly. There's a quote from Haggai 2:6. I will shake the earth and the skies. There's also short quotes from Zechariah and Daniel, which again tells us that it must have been written sometime after 165 or when Daniel got popular, shortly after that. And there are a number of expressions that look like quotes, but who knows what they're quoted from. This text is not known from any other Jewish source, actually nothing like it. The closest thing, again, is in the Talmud? And there's a passage in the Mishnah in regards to Messiah, son of Joseph, but otherwise, nothing. The characters in here are all used as apocalyptic references, and if you get into the ebook, there are actually 2 translations in there. One is an older one, the first one you see, that I went through this, and I thought, well, there's nothing in here that would lead you to believe anything. It's the second translation in the book, is Noel's translation. And there's an article in here on the Messiah, son of Joseph. I know that you'll be interested in that, he talks about Ephraim as the Messiah bar Yosef. Of course, he uses that in a figurative sense, I imagine. See what else here. Noel says in his article, Gabriel's revelation has a great deal to tell us about a different kind of Messiah. That is, a Messiah, son of Joseph, who is different from the biblical concept of a Davidic Messiah. And this is how it's different. Messiah, son of David, in most Jewish literature, is, of course, a coming king, but a coming king coming with armies at his disposal to destroy evil and to reestablish Jerusalem as the capital of the world. Whereas it's described here that the Ephraim, Messiah ben Yosef, is the suffering servant, can we say, that takes on the sins of the world, or at least Israel, and dies for that sin as a blood sacrifice. Also put up there the Sefer Zerubbabel, which is related to this text, not directly, but in some way, because it also describes Messiah, son of Joseph, and it describes him as having been killed by a wicked priest named Armilius. And I'm thinking of the wicked priest Ananus, or the wicked priest Caiaphas. Armilius or Armilius is not familiar to me. Maybe it is to you. But according to Noel's article again, this Messiah, son of Yosef, is a much older messianic type than we encounter later on in the time of the apocalypse of Zerubbabel, which is about 5th century Coptic, and is connected with the idea of messianic expectation in the apocryphal work Joseph and Asenath, the Egyptian apocryphal work that kind of connects Joseph to, again, Akhenaten, Asenath, which they figure that part was written between 110 and 115. There's another book from the Second Temple period that we may be familiar with. Well, it's a book of many books. It's the Testaments of the 12. In the Testament of Benjamin, there's a connection, just like this text makes, between the suffering servant of Isaiah 53 through about 55 and son of Yosef, Testament of Benjamin. In that testament, Yaakov says to Yosef, if you will be fulfilled, the heavenly prophecy, I'm sorry, in you will be fulfilled the heavenly prophecy, which says that the spotless one will be defiled by lawless men, and the sinless one will die for the sake of impious men. Testament of Benjamin is also dated by most to before the 1st century. So he's making the statement that this designation as son of Yosef goes back to the Second Temple period someplace, but at the same time, before the turn of the era. He also quotes the Peshikta Rabbati, a late midrash that glorifies Messiah Ephraim, that is Messiah ben Yosef. And in that particular text, the sins of others will bend you down under a yoke of iron. The Holy One, blessed be he, ask him if he's willing to endure the suffering. Messiah Ephraim, son of Joseph, asks how long his suffering will last. 7 years, replies the Holy One. After some more dialogue, the Messiah Ephraim says, Master of the universe, with joy in my soul and gladness in my heart, I take this suffering upon myself, provided not one person in Israel perish. But not only those who are alive be saved in my days, but also those who are dead. This, of course, is a reference to resurrection of the dead. And in this Peshikta Rabbati, Messiah is also identified with the suffering servant. There is a Jewish contingency of scholars that would say that this is a post-Christian text. But for me, as little as I know, I go through here, usually in these texts that are, well, I would say apocryphal texts that Christians write after the 1st century. They'll take a Jewish apocalypse and they will interpolate doctrine into it out of the Christian faith. However, I can't find any such thing in this except the messianic expectancy. And you and I both know that the generation before Messiah, Yahshua, there was a huge expectation. Actually, since about 60 BC, I believe that was when Ptolemy came in and took over the land of Israel, Palestine. You might need to correct me on that. I think it was 60. It could have been later than that. It's also interesting that this new text predicts in 3 days that evil will be defeated entirely, and defeated by righteous people rather than iniquitous people like the Romans. We read in Noel's translation the following: by 3 days you shall know that thus saith Yahweh Sabaoth, the Elohim of Israel, the evil has been broken by righteousness. We'll see that in lines 19 through 21. Then line 80 begins with the phrase, in 3 days. This is followed by another word that previous translators simply couldn't read. Then comes the phrase, I, Gabriel. This was Noel thinking that he needed to get the translation of the lacunae between the 3 days and I, Gabriel. And it looks to me like it was pretty simple because a couple of those letters were quite plain. What you do, you look at what's on the outskirts of the lacunae, or the lacuna, the hole in the scripture, and you try to find especially some biblical saying that will fit in there, because a lot of times it's quote from the Tanakh. And he found the word chaye in there, which you all know means life, or actually the verb form live. So what's happening is that Gabriel, the archangel, is giving orders, commanding someone to live. In 3 days, you shall live. In other words, Noel interprets this as, in 3 days, you shall be resurrected. Let's see. There's another part that he was able to reconstruct that the other translators were not. That's at the end of the Apocalypse. In 3 days, live, I, Gabriel, command you. L'shloset yamim chaye, ani Gabriel gozer elecha. The previous translators, when this translation came out, they looked again. And the main one who translates the first translation in your little book, Ada Yardani, very well known, came to agree with Noel on this translation. I just think she couldn't be the first to bring that out, because being also Jewish in religion and being a member of the institutional consensus establishment, no matter what it said, if it seemed to refer to Messiah in that time period, she could even lose her tenure and her job. That's just how jaded the institutional consensus folks are. We see another Messiah, that is Ephraim. As we said, the Messiah, son of Joseph. Now that Messiah was known, as I said before, in the 1st century BC, and that comes out of the Testament of Benjamin. But this Ephraim of Gabriel's revelation was probably based on biblical verses depicting him as the suffering Son of God. That is in the prophets Jeremiah 31, Hosea 11. And the setting of Gabriel's revelation reflects elements of death and bloodshed, as we will see. As I mentioned before, again, talking about Messiah ben Dawid, traditionally seen as bravery, military skill, triumph, war. Messiah, son of Yosef, symbolizes a very different and new kind of messianism for that time. Ephraim is the Messiah of suffering and death. It would be wonderful to be able to fill in all the holes in this text. Yeshua's teaching on the Temple Mount in all three synoptics. Surprisingly, he rejects the idea that he's the Messiah, son of Dawid. How can the scribe say that Messiah is the son of Dawid? That's in Mark 12, 33, I think, 35. To demonstrate that the Messiah is not the Ben Dawid, Yeshua quotes Psalm 110, attributed to Dawid in the Hebrew Bible, which we all know. Yahweh said to Adonai, I hope I got those right, or it's turned around, sit at my right hand till I put your enemies under your feet. Yeshua then uses this passage to prove his point. Dawid himself calls him Messiah, that is the Messiah, Adonai. So how is he his son? That is, Dawid speaks of the Messiah as Yahweh rather than as my son. Because it says my Lord or Lord in there twice, it's very confusing, that text, until you look back at the Hebrew. One of those is Adonai, or the master. The Messiah, therefore, cannot be a son of Dawid, using Psalm 110 as a proof text. He's using that as a historically reliable passage. And because it runs counter to the genealogies in Matthew and in Luke, which both show on either side that he's a scion of Dawid, that hermeneutically speaking, this is something we ought to pay attention to, because what he's saying is out of sync with the redaction of those other gospel writers, out of sync. When you see something like that slipping in, scholars in hermeneutics and exegesis will tell you, you better pay attention to that, because the harder saying is the one that is probably the truer saying. Here's actually what he says. Not only do versions of this incident appear in all three synoptics, but the very fact that it runs counter to the genealogies of Yeshua suggests that this contradictory version must be authentic. Otherwise, the author of the Gospels would not have included something that so blatantly clashes with their frequent reference to Yeshua, son of David. Okay, you can read the rest of that article if you like. Let's get into the translation a little bit. There's not much for a while. Can you see it all right up here on my screen? Just a few things to pick out. Son of David, the word of Yahweh, the sacred name is used in there. You have asked me, so said the Elohim of hosts, Saviot. From my house, Israel, I will talk about the greatness of Jerusalem. Thus said Yahweh, Elohim of Israel, now all the nations, ... encamp on Jerusalem, and from it are exiled. When you look at the earlier translations, they don't have anything near this much text in it. But again, the earlier translations were done by company men. 1, 2, 3, 40 prophets and the elders of the Hasidim. If we use this term in the Maccabean style of use, we're talking about Essene here. Hasidim equals Essene from the Maccabees on up to the first part of the first century. Prophets and the elders and the Hasidim. My servant David asked of Ephraim that he place the sign. This I ask of you, for thus said Yahweh Tzaviot, Elohim of Israel, my gardens are ripe, my holy thing for Israel. By 3 days you shall know. For thus said Yahweh Tzaviot, the Elohim of Israel, the evil has been broken before righteousness. Just a moment, please. One moment, please. The original translations are so sparse. This has content. This has revelation in it. We don't see the word Hasidim since the Maccabees. And now the servant of David were to ask of Ephraim, what does that mean? And the sign, what is the sign? The commentaries I've read on this is the sign of salvation, but I don't think it is. I think the sign is the sign of resurrection. Because when you get right down to it, the end of this text, that's what it's about, resurrection. What's the sign of resurrection in the first century? We see that sign on articles in the tombs. One particular figure as a sign of resurrection comes to my mind, and that's the sign of Yonah. And that's exactly what we find in the latest tombs that had been just excavated in Talpiot. The sign of the resurrection, that is Jonah, the whale with a head sticking out the mouth. I don't know that that's what it is, but it seems to me placing the sign would have to be something graphic. And as far as I know, that one, or maybe you can think of some of the other signs that are used to depict resurrection. I'm thinking of the ichthus, the Good Shepherd, that's not resurrection. There are other ones. Place the sign, this I ask of you, for thus said Yahweh Tzviot, the Elohim of Israel, my gardens are ripe. Sounds like the harvest is ripe. And then this prophecy goes on to say, the very thing we're waiting for the evil of, or the end of, and that's evil. When we speak of the end of the world, we're not speaking the end of the earth. We're speaking at the end of evil, which has been promised in Enoch, many other texts, that evil will be judged and put to silence, and its deeds will be indeed broken. And by righteousness, we've always seen this depicted as war of some kind. In the war scroll, for instance, the battles are all set out, 7 battles against the evil ones, angels and people. But there's something else here that's going to break. Oh, they consider warfare to be righteous if the philosophy behind it is righteous. But thinking about the Messiah Ben Yosef, that is Ephraim, and what it is said about Ephraim in these various texts that I mentioned, it seems to me that we're talking about suffering here, and sacrifice, and blood, and resurrection. Ask me in 21, and I'll tell you what this wicked branch is, plastered white. Doesn't that make you think of the plastering white of the foul tombs of the Pharisees? Plastered white, but inside full of evil. This wicked branch, it's called the branch because the branch coming out of the stem of the tree, coming out of the gaza, out of the stump, has become profligate. And the promise is, like the fig tree, it will be cut off. I believe that's why they're using branch there, netzar or gaza, the stump. You are standing. The angel is supporting you. What that key word there, standing? We've all taken a course or read about the standing man, how that term is used in this particular time. It's speaking of one that doesn't die, but stands in the way of sinners. And no matter what sinners do to them, they can't die. It's impossible for those who are regenerated and standing in the way of sinners to die. You can kill the body, but when the body is killed, that makes the standing man all the more powerful. But in this case, the angel is supporting you. Don't fear. Blessed is the kavod of Yahweh Elohim from his seat, his throne, his kes. For in a little while, I will shake the skies and the earth. Here is the kavod of Yahweh Elohim, Tzaviot, the Elohim of Israel. These are the 7 chariots at the gate of Jerusalem and the gates of Judea. They will rest for my 3 angels, Michael and all the others. Look for your power. Oh, what are the 3 that are mentioned most when there's a bevy of 3? I guess that would be either Michael, Gabriel, and Uriel, or Michael, Gabriel, and Raphael, probably Uriel. We see him more. It appears that he's saying to the standing one, rest upon the power of these righteous Malachim. When you're standing in the way of sinners, rest upon the power of the Malachim. What a lesson. So said Yahweh, Elohim, Tzaviot, the Elohim of Israel. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 for my angels. There's the whole bevy of them. What is this? He said, the frontlet. I would probably translate that word vanguard. Going out in front. Like I saw a backhoe with a blade on it come down the road, pushing the dirt down the road. That blade was like a frontlet, pushing through while the others follow. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I believe that the speaking out the numbers there is a reference to power, not just the word 7. And the 7 chariots and the 7 malachim. Seven for my angels. The frontlet. The second chief watches on. I didn't really have time to look at the Hebrew of this, so I don't know what that word is to analyze it. Then we see another number here going on, 333. A sign from Jerusalem. Ashes and a sign of exile. Sign of exile again. We have to go on a little ways to get intelligent information down to column 2. Oh, I don't know where I went there. I want to just go up a hair. That this mist in 40 will fill most of the moon. Blood. That the northerner would become maggoty. Abhorrence, the diseased spot in all. We can only imagine what precisely that's talking about, but whatever it is, it's bound to be done with in accordance with this prophecy. And we got several lines that are gone. They will rest in 53. By 3 days, this is what I have said. These are, please see the northerner encamps. I don't know. Seal up the blood of the slaughtered of Yerushalayim. For thus says Yahweh Tzaviot, the Elohim of Israel, so said Yahweh Tzaviot, the Elohim of Israel. Wish we had that lacunae. He will have pity. His mercies are near. 3 holy ones of the world from Shalom, he said, in you we trust. Then what? Announce him of blood. This is their chariot. Many of those who love Yahweh Tzaviot, the Elohim of Israel, thus said Yahweh Tzaviot, the Elohim of Israel, question mark again. Prophets, I send to my people my 3 shepherds. There is that adjective again, 3. We had 7 time and again. We started out with 3, and now we're back to 3 again. 3 shepherds, 3, a trio of angels were spoken of. You think that's the Father and the Son and the Holy Ghost? I don't know. Maybe it's Jesus, James, and John. 72, the place for Dawid, the servant of Yah. 73, the heaven and the earth, blessed. I think this would be fairly easy to reconstruct. Showing steadfast love to thousands, Isaiah 20. 3 shepherds again. Now, I know that that's a reference to something, someplace, the 3 shepherds. If there is a priest, if there are sons of holy ones, I don't know. Who am I? Here we go. I am Gabriel. Is it a man? Is it a Malik? You will rescue them. Is he now speaking to Messiah, Bar Yosef? From before of you, in front of you, the 3 signs 3. And here are the 3 signs. In 3 days, live. I, Gabriel, command you. And we mustn't forget that in the testimonies of the nativities of Yeshua, who is the Malik guiding his life, speaking to his mother? None other than this same angel. One certainly could have influenced the other. 3 days live. I command you, prince of the princes, Sarim, the dung of the rocky crevices, to the visions, their tongue. Those who love me, to me, from the 3, the small one that I took, I, Gabriel, and that's about it. Then you will stand. Verse 85. And there's notes here. Hazon, Gabriel, let's see a picture of it. Yes, we're going to see a picture, a bigger picture. I want to put Hazon in there. Rev. Did you notice? Well, you will in a minute. I am using Bing. I may be the only one in the whole world. And you know why I'm using Bing instead of a better one than that? Because Bing pays you. Bing pays you. Does that sound interesting? You do a lot of search engine stuff. Come over to Bing and get paid. Oh, I still don't know how to use Bing quite right, but unfortunately, in the course of traveling around, like the James ossuary, the thing broke. Very fragile. It's still here. You can see how light the writing is on there. And obviously the scribe was of the Dead Sea Scroll scribe community, so they say. Probably didn't know how to chisel it in there. That would be very hard to discern or see. And if we can get another picture here. Here's the big one. It's supposed to be. It's 900 there. So the stone's about 3 foot long. You can see about how wide it is from there. And the back side of it had mortar on it, so it's stuck into the side of a building. There you have it. You can get the ebook down. I got it from the Biblical Archaeology Society. And let's just go on. We got time for one more. We'll do Lots of Mary. Gospel of the Lots of Mary. And I do think I'm going to put this one up because it's got some dandy pictures in it. Where are you? Triads. I had this all set up. Of course, I can't find it. Here it is. Here it is. Gospel of the Lots of Mary. Now, this was just discovered a couple of years ago. This is a very small codex. 3 inches. And when you find out what it is, you'll understand why it's only 3 inches. At least I think I know. This is like those mini books you get at the grocery store. Those little books, you know, when you go to checkout, they're just real small and you can get them and they have stuff in them like suggestions how you can get skinny and make yourself look better and cut off your head and stuff. Well, this is in Coptic. Coptic is Egyptian in Greek letters and added a few letters like that one right there to fill out the Greeks or the Egyptian sounds. But when I look at Coptic, when it's typed out, it is, for the most part, easy for me to read. There are a lot of the Coptic words that are also the same word in Greek, and that's because just like Palestine, the Greeks had the place for 300 years. And if the Greeks were ruling over you, you had to worship Greek, you had to learn Greek and speak Greek, you had to. That was the conditions of you being alive. So I think there's 37 oracles in here. Let me ask you, has anybody ever had one of those 8-ball things with a little screen on it? You shake it up, roll it around, and lay it down. When it comes to a triangle, will come up to the top, and you'll see in the little window an answer. Have you ever, I suppose when you're a child, maybe Bishop Brink still does this, but you make out of a piece of paper a cootie catcher. You remember those? You put fortunes inside and say a little rhyme or something, and somebody does the cootie catcher, and then you pick out a fold in there, and there's a fortune in it. Now I'm going to get you on this one. How many ever played Bible roulette? I'll tell you, that Bible roulette, it works. Especially if you're not thinking about it. You got something on your mind, you pick up the Bible, you're not thinking about it, you just open it up and boom, right there. I think there's power in that. Well, this is mainly 37 pages of answers. And it appears like this text was thumbed through Still thumbprints on it. See if there's more pictures. That's a pretty good picture right there of a codex. Thumb through there. Look at the side on here. This has been used. There was an age when these things were quite popular. Let's see. I'm trying to think. What is this from? What century? I have forgotten. Let's see. Well, who knows? But Coptic was about up to 500 or 400 AD. Anyway, there was a time when these so-called lot books were very popular. They were also, according to Roman law, illegal. And that solves the mystery of why the thing is so small. It can be held in the palm of the hand. Certain, especially women, had access to lot books, but only one woman had access to the Gospel of the Lots of Mary. Insofar as we know, this is the only one. And people would come and pay good money to get into the Lots book, especially one with the name Mary on it and the name Jesus in various places in the book. Every oracle in here is vague. Let me read a couple for you. And then we'll close up for tonight and get on to something else next time. Let's see, next time, Friday night, we're going to go back to Paul, and we're going to go to Lake Pontius Pilate. That'll be fun. I enjoyed doing those Paul messages the last 2 weeks. Enjoyed it. I suspect the end of this week with Liz's Paul the Kabbalist coming up on Hebrew Nation Radio, I'll probably get fired. But then again, I don't get paid for it anyway. I'll just send a sad email out. Okay, here's one. You know, O human, that you did your utmost again. You didn't gain anything but loss, dispute, and war. But if you are patient a little, the matter will prosper through the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. There's one page. I thought, boy, this would really be helpful if I could make up one of these books. Do I think it's wrong? Do I think it's a cult? No. No. How many times has Bible Roulette helped me to make a decision? It forces you to make a decision. Either the Bible is going to inform you, or you're going to say, no, that doesn't have anything to do with this, but you're going to make a decision. Another example is Oracle 34. Go forward immediately. This is a thing from God. You know that, behold, if for many days you are suffering greatly. But it is of no concern to you, because you've come to the haven of victory. Isn't this like today's modern prophecy movement? Have you ever gone up to the prophet? I hope with pneumatology class you will. You know, I've asked you in the pneumatology class to go sign up at the United Pentecostal Church and start going there Sunday nights so you can see some things going on, make some judgments for yourself as to whether they're scriptural or not. In the prophecy movement, you go to the prophet, he has a word for you, or she. Usually there's a cassette tape made, and you keep that tape. I've done that before. Let me tell you what happened. 96, 95, 97. In that area, I knew a man in Pensacola named Johnny Foote, Flame of Fire Ministries. This guy, we were in the Full Gospel Businessmen's together, and this guy was tormented with stuttering. Then one day, he was healed. And what came out of his mouth instead were magnificent prophecies. So he was my friend. My wife and I went over there. And he prophesied, and he said, hold this back. It was just so amazing to me that he could. I'd only known this stuttering, clumsy guy, but he was all full of confidence and speaking quite plainly and spoke in scriptural terms. It's outstanding. I listened to those tapes, and I did one of my podcasts going through that tape of 20 years before. He read my mail years before. There's something to it. I've grown up in that movement. I believe in it. Another interesting example, let's see if I did this one. This is very good, especially in the current situation that I've been in the last 2 months. Not me, but somebody that's been here. Stop being of two minds, O human. Whether this thing will happen or not. Yes, it will happen. Be brave and do not be of two minds, because it will remain with you a long time and you will receive joy and happiness. You know, to get something like that, sometimes it's encouraging enough to actually happen. The text is now owned by Harvard University's Sackler Museum. It was given to Harvard in 1984 by Beatrice Kelekian, who donated in memory of her husband, Charles Dickrock Kelekian. We all remember him, don't we? We do now. Charles' father, Dickron Kelekian, died 51, was an influential trader of Coptic antiquities, deemed the dean of antiquities among New York art dealers. It's not known where the Kelekians got the gospel. The author of this article searched the Kelekian family archive, but found no information about where the text came from or when it was acquired. Listen to this. It's possible that in ancient times, the book was used by a diviner at the shrine of Saint Coleuthus in Egypt. Remember, Saint Coleuthus was the one that swallowed the fly and then had to swallow a spider to catch the fly. At this shrine, archaeologists have found texts with written questions indicating that the site was used for various forms of divination. That's not divination. Among the services offered to visitors of the shrine were dream incubation. Dream incubation. There's going to be a test on this. Now, I want you all to go home and incubate some dreams. If you can, put those dreams in bottles of ethanol alcohol, put a tight lid on them, and every week turn them over. And then we'll look at them sometime. Dream incubation, ritual bathing, and both book and ticket divination. Sounds like a modern day spa, doesn't it? Day spa. I'm going to go have my toenails done tomorrow. I just feel so good after that. Small book, ancient thumbprints. That's just so interesting. I don't know if Brad's still here, but you know, I was really thinking about you this whole time, just writing a book for you to use, Brad. We could use it together. You know, when we get together next time, we could sit down and get some of these questions answered. Why don't you write half of it? I'll write the other half, and Norman will write the third half. Thank you for coming tonight. I'll look at the chat. So I think there's only one thing there. Oh yes. Messiahs of Yosef, Dawid, and Aaron. Of course. Thank you. And thank you all. Hope to see you Friday. Good night.